We head over now to Yael Ossowski, the Deputy Director, the Consumer Choice Center, the globetrotter himself, from Brazilian climate change conferences to all of the shenanigans he gets up to over in Vienna. How's it going, man? You tired yet?
Not tired yet. I got plenty of energy, good caffeine. You can do a lot with nicotine too. So I'm doing fine.
So tell us about this Brazilian climate change summit. Our colleague, Stephen Kent, he reached out and he was squawking like a snapped mule over this. I got to hear what you're talking about. What's going on?
Well, you have the Conference of the Parties, number 30. This is something that just normally, if we had a Democratic administration in Washington, would basically be the talk of the town. But because we have Trump, they don't really care as much. And this is the annual gathering that is hosted by the United Nations. It's where the nations get together and talk about essentially their climate accords. And we're going back to the 2015 Paris Climate Accords, and they're just kind of catching up on how everybody's doing and what are new measures we can do to be sure that people are in line with the Paris Agreement.
So the particular Paris Agreement's got a couple of rocky bumps. I mean, we're finding out, well, we're not finding out. We are now being affirmed, I should say, by some of the previous fearmongers that climate change is not coming to kill us all and leave our skins on lampposts.
Well, it's definitely true that a lot of the projections have definitely not panned out. So, we heard 12 years, 15 years. Realistically, the Paris Climate Accords is pretty sober. Look, the whole thing is they want to try to reduce global temperature by 1.6 degrees Celsius in the next 100 years. And essentially what this agreement really portends and requires of all nations is everybody's got to have some kind of plan in order to reduce their emissions. It doesn't mean about being more efficient with energy. It doesn't mean that you're going to be using cool, awesome new sources. It just means you get rid of the emissions. So you use less, and somehow that makes the planet much better. That's kind of the argument they're using.
So in this particular argument, though, what some of the nations that are supposedly at least fraternizing with some of this policy or this plan or accord or whatever we're going to call it, they are producing more emissions. Now, they may have their, state communication services get out there and claim, hey, we're producing a lot fewer emissions. But when you actually look at the satellite coverage and you see yet another 15 coal plants built along the Yangtze River or something along those lines, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of Paris climate goodness. Not something that would make Jane Goodall smile, I'm afraid.
Yeah, a lot of what COP30 is about, and most of the COPs that have dealt with climate, is just selective facts and figures. So obviously in Europe, where you have a lot of people who are very excited about this, essentially they've torn down all of the nuclear power plants, which were zero emissions. And now the country of Germany is very reliant on coal. They're very reliant on natural gas imports. And luckily, new markets have opened up, and Europe is importing a lot more LNG from the United States, which is very good. But at the same time, you have China and you have India. They're building a lot more coal plants. They're continuing with huge mining projects. So a lot of this is just kind of saving face for some of the environmental movement. And a very important part of this is that these plans includes many different credits and swaps. So if you're not doing particularly,
that's what I wanted to get to, the credits and swaps. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It was just, it's like a sleeper cell activation. I hear the word credits and I'm like, oh no.
So they have this right now in the European Union. They just agreed, I think 2 days ago, that they're going to be essentially net zero carbon emissions in the next 15 years, which very tall order. But the way that they're going to do it is they're going to use, about 85% will be actual reductions. And then the rest will actually be those caps and those licenses that they'll take from somewhere else. So somewhere where they actually have cut carbon emissions, the EU will buy them, and that will apply to their certain limit. So essentially, you have a lot of finance guys that are doing these caps that are essentially fudging the numbers to say, look, yes, we polluted a lot. In our terms, we polluted a lot this year, but it's okay because Ecuador didn't do it so much. So we're going to buy a couple of their licenses and then we're fine. So again, it's an ESG score sort of on steroids, and that's the problem.
It sounds like indulgences to me. It's like, my country has sinned this much to the climate, therefore we will pay this amount of money, as though it's like, yeah, sure, we had a lot of emissions, but we also, bribed the UN to look the other way on it. And we also paid off the scientists who made the emissions look worse than they are. And of course, you know who ends up footing the bill. This is something that you focus on quite a bit. The consumer, the person in the house with the rising energy bill ends up footing more because some random country in the UN goofed on their emission goal they signed up for.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of, obviously, a lot of people who are coming from developing countries that will be taking the floor at COP30. Thankfully, though, as everyone knows, President Trump took the United States out of the Paris Accords many years ago. So there is no official U.S. delegation. We've seen Gavin Newsom fly down there, a couple of the governors and people just trying to make headlines. But it is true. A lot of this just comes down to a lot of, very brave, stunning and brave. There's so much sort of this racketeering, and it's all about these numbers and figuring out. And that's why you often have countries like the Maldives or Mauritius, countries that most people have never heard of, apart from a vacation destination, become integral to this stuff because they're selling all of their carbon licenses to some of the other countries. Well, realistically, if you want to deal with this stuff,
scummy.
If you want to deal with it, 100%. And if you want to deal with this stuff, you have to talk about technology, and you want to talk about innovation, you want to talk about transmission, you want to talk about next level technologies, which the US is the leader of, but that's not part of the agenda. The agenda is just how do we get emissions, which they claim are pollution, how do we get those down? And it's just not a good metric. It's certainly not a good metric for human progress, but certainly not for liberty and then for consumers who have to pay much higher energy bills everywhere in the world because of it.
Of course, just to cap this off, because it's so hilarious to watch this. Essentially, what's going on is you have a hunter. He's already exceeded his maximum amount of doe tags or buck tags for the year. And so he shoots another one. And the game warden's like, dude, you're out of tags. Like you no more deer this year. Can you hunt? And he says, oh, that's all right. My buddy Jim down the road, I bought one of his tags from him. And the game warden's like, dude, that's not how this works. But that's how it works at the United Nations and at COP30. And of course, Gavin Newsom with the plague of scandals regarding fraud in his administration currently would swing on down to COP30. If that just isn't the piece de resistance, I don't know what is.
Good French use of the term. Absolutely. And, we have our own issues when it comes to energy in the U.S. I mean, we obviously have raising prices. We've got issues, particularly in the Northeast, which is actually the highest electricity price place in the entire country. And a lot of that does come down to government bureaucracy. It comes down to a lot of red tape. We're not able to build new projects. They are being stopped in some blue states. You definitely see that. And then you have, obviously, the climate litigation game. So you have lawsuits being launched in most of those blue states against oil and gas providers, even electricity providers. So you have this kind of constant pressure in many of these blue states. I would love to say that the Secretary of the Energy, Christopher Wright, is doing a good job, because I think he is. But a lot of these problems are just local. They're right in our own communities. It's a lot of the NIMBYs. You have a lot of different narratives popping up, people trying to stop the building of new transmission lines. That's the kind of stuff that we need if we want to make energy affordable. It certainly ain't going to come from a UN conference or whatever emissions caps things they're talking about.
I mean, precisely. This is one of the key issues that I consider. There are national issues, but in order to solve a lot of national issues, it requires you getting involved at the local level and getting a lot of these, well, for lack of a better term, goobers who have used bureaucratic regulation to stifle your state's energy production. Getting them out of office and getting that stuff cleaned up. Absolutely. Well said.
And there's been many of states have actually tried to implement their own sort of net zero policy. I think Minnesota is the most famous for this.
That's
they're saying,
popped into my mind.
We're going for net zero. We're going good. And they're, maybe they have very good wind energy. They've set up some good solar stuff, which works 3 months out of the year. But they're still having to use oil and gas because that's how our economy runs. That's how we live life. It's how we heat our homes.
They bought some of Connecticut's gas and oil credits, so we all get to go home happy, right? I mean, come on.
And obviously the worst, offender of everyone is California, because they do have this kind of carbon market, and it is just this entire swap and trade. I know JP Morgan Chase and many other companies are very happy with it because it's a wonderful market to participate in, but it really doesn't do anything. And that's why I think we need to have these energy discussions a lot more, because this stuff is going to impact not just, elections going forward, but this is at the front of mind for everyone. Everyone's having to pay these bills, having to pay more at the pump. And I think the electricity price was definitely going to be a big thing for the midterms, any local races that you might have. And it's stuff that people are talking about at city councils, county commissions. this stuff is real. And it is true that it hurts, but we have to figure out why that's happening and how we can improve it.
Yael Ossowski over at the Consumer Choice Center. Stellar stuff. And as always, thank you very much for giving us a bit of a light on these rising climate energy nonsense projects.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tony. Cheers.